Prince Harry flees Meghan Markle and his 2 children after a matter of days to return to Ukraine, where he has once again shamed the British royal family.
You're not even willing to pay for your own security. You want the UK taxpayers to pay for that for you, the Australian taxpayers to pay for aspects of that for you.
The surrounds of the Opera House have got more people there than we saw for Harry and Meghan. It's like people avoided the area to avoid them.
Prince Harry today has said that he would like to see you do more to end the war in Ukraine. Do you think it's appropriate for a royal to make those comments ahead of the visit on Monday?
Prince Harry?
Yes, sir.
How's he doing? How's his wife? Please give him my regards, okay? Yeah.
How dare you go out there and go, well, the United States needs to respect certain things. Well, how about you respecting your own father and your grandmother, Harry?
Tens of thousands of children taken from their parents, given new names, new citizenship, placed into foreign families, cut off from their language, their culture, their identity, and under international law, that can constitute an act of genocide. That was in Harry's speech. The speech everyone spent 2 days mocking.
Prince Harry in Kyiv, where he is once again a convenient and willing pawn for those who are either willing to pay him or willing to indulge him, as he makes a speech that, much like his wife, just is a series of vacuous nonsense that's not going to move anything, where he calls out Vladimir Putin. But I can guarantee you guys, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are having a good laugh at this dim prince who actually thinks he's making any sort of a difference.
Did you hear about that part? Because the people covering this story on both sides were so busy arguing about whether Harry had the right to give a speech at all, that the actual content went almost entirely unexamined.
That you're not even on their level. I could understand this. This is a real thing. I could understand if someone like William said this, or maybe even the king. They're working royals. Not only that, they're the ones at the top. So that I would understand. Would they ever do that? No, because they're not idiots. They wouldn't go on an international stage and literally poke at international leaders like Putin and Trump. That's the stupidest thing to do. So what does Trump do? He puts him in his place.
And here is the truly fascinating part. The same speech that had one audience calling for his deportation had a completely different audience in tears, calling him the greatest statesman of his generation. Same 17 minutes. 2 completely opposite reactions. And today we are going to explain exactly why. Because that contradiction tells you something important, not just about Harry, but about the world we are living in right now. Stay with me.
To address leaders, world leaders, at this Kyiv Security Forum, and he's going to say some pretty harsh words about Vladimir Putin, calling out his war crimes. And his visit, he says, is really an attempt to stop the world, remind the world not to go numb to the horrors and the significance of what's happening in Ukraine. He said that Ukraine is defending Europe, and it's really important not to lose sight of that.
And then he turned up. I mean, look, this is just ludicrous, right?
Let's start with the facts, because the facts are genuinely more interesting than the argument around them. Thursday morning, Kyiv, Harry's 3rd visit to Ukraine. He stood at the Kyiv Security Forum and delivered a 17-minute speech that covered significantly more ground than the 30 seconds of it that made the news cycle. He spoke about psychological warfare, the invisible wounds carried by soldiers returning from the front, the exhaustion of civilians living under years of constant bombardment, the specific and unglamorous work of organizations, clearing landmines from fields and villages long after the fighting moves elsewhere.
Union Jack flags behind Harry as if he represents the United Kingdom, which he does not. He doesn't represent anything except for his own business interests. And the danger for Harry is that he's getting this very much inflated ego over the Invictus Games and what it means and how it helps veterans and these sorts of things. And I understand why he's so passionate about the program, but that does not, just because he's a soldier, does not give him any right to talk about these big, complex geopolitical issues that he is completely ignorant of.
Then he reached the section that should have dominated coverage and didn't. He described what is happening to Ukrainian children in occupied territories, not in vague terms, in specific, documented, legally precise language. Tens of thousands of children forcibly removed from their homes, many separated from parents who were killed, detained, or simply lost in the chaos, transported into Russia or Russian-controlled territories, given new identities, new citizenship, placed into Russian families, systematically stripped of their language, their culture, their country.
Tens of thousands of Ukrainian children have been forcibly taken from their homes. Many separated from parents who were killed, detained, or simply lost in the chaos, and transported into Russia or Russian-controlled territories. There they are subjected to a system designed to erase who they are, given new identities, new citizenship, placed into Russian families, and cut off from language, culture, and country. Obstacles are deliberately created to prevent their return.
He then stated carefully and correctly that under international law, the forcible transfer of children from one national group to another, carried out with the intent to destroy a people's identity, can constitute an act of genocide. The International Criminal Court has already issued arrest warrants related to exactly this conduct.
Under international law, this forcible transfer of children from one national group to another is not just a war crime. It can constitute an act of genocide when carried out with intent to destroy a people's identity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not collateral damage. This is not the chaos of war spilling over. This is organized, systemic, intentional, and designed to endure long after the fighting stops.
Now, you can agree or disagree with Harry being the person standing at that podium. That is a completely legitimate debate, and we are going to have it.
I have a huge problem with that. I'm a soldier who understands service. So that gives you the right, that gives you the know-how to come to a big event like this and have any measure of discernible and intelligent conversation about the intricacies of geopolitical politics in this region that was previously the USSR, that previously that Stalin starved, that Hitler invaded, and all these sorts of things. That gives you the right. I'm a soldier, man. Harry, I think there are millions upon millions of veterans out there, and you spent most of your time in a bunker playing video games.
But the content of what he said in that section was not opinion. It was documented. It was legally grounded. And it was almost entirely ignored by every commentator who spent 2 days arguing about his right to speak. That tells you more about the state of media coverage than it tells you about Harry.
Nobody comes out of war clean. War is an ugly, horrifically awful thing. People want I don't know if you want to call it like virtual wars or moral wars or something like that. It might start out that way, but when it comes to fighting on the ground, it almost always gets ugly, ladies and gentlemen. There's just, again, no way to avoid that. So I want to listen to a couple of clips from Harry. And I want us to listen to them so you can hear what this deluded fool thinks, because he's speaking. And again, he is there as a convenient propaganda tool.
Here is the other thing that slipped past most people. An analyst ran that speech through an AI detection tool and estimated it was 85 to 90% likely to have been generated or heavily assisted by artificial intelligence.
So I actually don't believe that this is something that the British government are having a part of. I think Harry wants to make money, but I think he also wants to cause trouble. But by the way, the brilliant Tom Sykes of the Royalist Substack is the speech, 85 to 90% chance, that the speech chastising America was written by AI.
AI detection is not a perfect science, but read the speech back yourself. The sentence structures are unusually formal. The legal and historical references, the Budapest Memorandum, nuclear non-proliferation frameworks, the precise legal threshold for genocide sit oddly next to the man who admitted in his own memoir that he struggled with basic personal decisions for years. They sound less like a man speaking from experience and more like a man reading something he was handed.
If you don't have nuclear weapons, you are vulnerable. That's just reality. And yes, countries should have been able to protect the integrity of Ukraine, but that's also quite difficult. That's not just a simple thing. It's like, oh yeah, we'll go. Like, does Harry want American boots on the ground, UK boots on the ground defending Ukraine? That's just not how it's going to work. And that was sort of impossible at the time. And to be honest, I don't know the intricacies of all of that, but I would imagine there are pieces of this that were missing from this speech and context that was missing from this speech. Again, because he just doesn't fully understand this. And somebody else wrote this speech for him and told him about this nuclear weapon aspect, which again is real. This is 100% real. But when you lose out on nuclear weapons, you do leave yourselves vulnerable. That's just fact.
Which raises the question nobody is asking. If that speech was written by AI or by a team with a very specific agenda, whose agenda was Harry serving? And who exactly paid for the trip?
What is Harry really? Globalist ginger puppet, right? What is he really? Because I've always wondered this when he puts himself on this international stage. Why? Who's telling him to do this? Who's paying him for this? Because apparently it was all Invictus, supposedly. You know, that's the real question.
Now, here's the thing that makes this story genuinely complicated, and I want to be honest with you about it because I think you deserve that. The video of that speech has comments running into the thousands, and they are not what the anti-Harry media would have you believe. A comment with over 1,300 likes from a Swedish viewer opened with an Old Norse saying about standing for what you believe in until your last breath. Hundreds of comments from Canadians, New Zealanders, Americans, South Africans, not royal watchers, not Sussex fans, ordinary people moved by what they heard. Many of them mentioned Diana, that her voice could be heard through his, that she would be proud.
Prince Harry echoes the "I am not a political figure" words of his mother, Princess Diana, in Angola in 1997. He tells the Kiev Security Forum in Ukraine today, "I'm not here as a politician, I'm here as a soldier who understands service, as a humanitarian who has seen the human cost of conflict, and as a friend of Ukraine who believes the world must not grow used to this war or numb to its consequences." But it's like, Harry, we know you're stupid, but Princess Diana wasn't going around the world attacking politicians, whether they're tyrants or not. You're nothing like Diana, mate. You're not a humanitarian. You're a hard left political grifter.
And whether you find that powerful or cynical depends entirely on which version of Harry you decided was the real one years ago. Here is what I think is actually true. The speech contained genuinely important content about documented war crimes and the suffering of children that deserved serious coverage. It also came at a moment of such catastrophic diplomatic timing 3 days before King Charles lands in Washington for the most sensitive royal visit.
There is still a moment now to stop this war, to prevent further suffering for Ukrainians and Russians alike, and to choose a different course.
I'm actually laughing because it's like as if Putin gives a damn. He thinks this is hilarious, but this is a serious embarrassment for both the British government and the British royal family ahead of King Charles's state visit to Washington, D.C. next week.
In a generation that its sincerity becomes almost impossible to separate from its convenience, both things can be true simultaneously. Harry can care about Ukraine and still have terrible judgment.
Harry's not a smart guy. He's just really not. And he should be smart enough to know and understand that he should really have no bearing here. This weirdness of leveraging the Invictus Games to somehow be like this global ambassador for veterans. I'm like, no, that's not your role. That's not your job. Just because you run the Invictus Games or help run it or whatever doesn't mean you can actually offer any assistance to the broader world when it comes to the complexities of geopolitical conflicts.
The speech can contain real substance and still have been written by someone else. The audience applauding him in Kiev can be responding to something genuine, while the audience watching from London and Washington is responding to something equally genuine. That is the contradiction at the heart of everything Harry does, and it is why he remains, infuriatingly for everyone, impossible to simply dismiss.
Harry is criticizing the United States, the country where he lives, where his visa might be exposed quite soon, and attempting, you could say, to push the president in one way or another. Good luck with that, Harry.
Now let's talk about what this speech may have just cost him, because Harry has a legal problem in America that predates this trip by years and has never fully gone away. In 2023, Harry published Spare. In it, he openly admitted to using cocaine, cannabis, and magic mushrooms. He described the experiences in detail. He framed drug use as something close to necessary self-medication. Here is why that matters under U.S. law. When you apply for an American visa, you're required to disclose prior drug use. If you lie on that application, it is classified as a material misrepresentation. The legal consequences are deportation and a permanent bar from re-entering the country. Florida Congressman Greg Stuba introduced legislation called the SPARE Act, named directly after Harry's memoir, which would permanently ban foreign nationals from the United States if they knowingly provided false information about drug use on their visa applications. The Department of Homeland Security kept Harry's records sealed throughout this entire process. A ruling earlier this year appeared to resolve the immediate legal threat, with the Department of Homeland Security confirming his application had followed all applicable rules and regulations.
They blame everyone for everything. They take absolutely no blame, even when they do things that are despicable, like shilling her trauma closet on Bondi Beach, where 15 Jews were massacred over Hanukkah. There was no apology. There was no, oops, we're so sorry, we didn't mean to take offense. No, they simply changed the photo to her walking on pavement and not the beach. They never apologize. They never admit they've done anything wrong.
But here is where it refuses to stay resolved. The Heritage Foundation announced it would continue the fight to fully unseal Harry's official immigration documents. The records remain partially redacted. The organization driving that legal challenge has close ideological ties to the current Washington administration. And Harry just gave that organization's allies a very fresh reason to keep pushing. Will anyone deport Harry directly over a speech? Almost certainly not. But does this week remind powerful figures in Washington that this man living on American soil, reportedly costing $3 million annually in security, contributing nothing in taxes as a non-citizen, is now actively complicating American diplomatic positioning on the world stage 3 days before a major allied state visit? That question answers itself.
He's in the Kremlin right now laughing his butt off because he does not care. And he's like this nincompoop who spends most of his time acting like his wife's manservant, serving her, basically rolling out the red carpet for her. This guy thinks he can appeal to me, the freaking dictator of a country, and I'm just going to fall in line because, oh, so sad, people are dying. That's how a person like Putin thinks.
And while all of this was unfolding, something else was quietly falling apart in California. Something that has received almost no serious coverage, despite being, frankly, a story that should alarm anyone who has ever donated money to this couple's charitable work. Harry and Meghan's Archewell Foundation is in severe financial trouble. The foundation raised roughly $2.7 million during the last reporting period, while expenditures reached $5.2 million, a deficit of approximately $2.5 million. The year before had shown a surplus of $2.4 million, a $5 million swing in a single year.
She's not parading the children around at events. She never shows their faces. The Sussexes, of course, have bills. Page 6 previously reported that they have an estimated $3 million annual security tab. They have to make a living. And I mean, we saw that this week. There was an email that came through introducing the Mother's Day collection. And Paula, your reporting on this is that by selling these candles, they are now monetizing the late Queen. And you say that they do have control of their children's names.
Archewell fired 60% of its workforce during this same period. But the detail that should concern anyone who donated money to this organization based on Harry's public profile and royal connections is this. Charity Watch, an independent nonprofit watchdog, contacted Archewell 3 separate times, requesting the independently audited financial statements the charity publicly claims to produce. January 2024, December 2024, January 2026. All 3 requests were ignored. 3 requests, 2 years, total silence. The filings that are publicly available show Archewell spent more than $1 million on what is described as programmatic strategic support to outside agencies, including the PR firm M&C Saatchi. $1 million on their own public relations from a charity that raised $2.7 million total.
Harry is so bored. I mean, I've written about this for over a year. He doesn't have any friends in Montecito. The people he hangs out with are his bodyguards. And of course, Meghan and the children. And he's basically a stay-at-home daddy who does pickups and hangs out with the kids and plays with them while Meghan works. And, you know, it is very boring. And I think he's used to a different life. He's definitely yearning for his life in England.
Meanwhile, grants to the regions highlighted during the couple's high-profile humanitarian tours were strikingly modest $10,000 to sub-Saharan Africa and $8,310 to South America, despite well-publicized tours to Nigeria and Colombia. Harry tours Nigeria, makes the speeches, posts the photographs. $8,310 goes to South America. $1 million goes to the PR firm.
Harry and Meghan are very involved in World Central Kitchen. She's, very close to the chef Jose. And so we have a reference to a charity he promotes with Meghan. So it feels to me like a brand plug. Sort of what it feels like. It's like, look, I'm talking about World Central Kitchen. Oh, World Central Kitchen PR. You're going to give me my money now, right? For mentioning you in this speech. Yeah. I mean, maybe again, guys, I'm too cynical, but let's be honest here. This is not just one, but two.
The charity's registration with the California Attorney General expired in May 2025, and the most recent filing in the California AG's database covers only fiscal year 2023. That is not an administrative oversight. That is a charity operating in California without current state registration. While its public credibility is built entirely on the royal titles, Harry is still using the same titles he was supposed to stop using for commercial purposes when he left the palace in 2020.
Not only because of its power, but because when Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons, America was part of the assurance that Ukraine's sovereignty and borders would be respected. This is a moment for American leadership, a moment for America to show that it can honor its international treaty obligations, not out of charity, but out of its own enduring role in global security and strategic stability.
Do you understand what he is doing here? He is trying to fuck up the state visit for his father. He is directly criticizing President Trump 3 days before King Charles III touches down in Washington, D.C.
Step back now and look at everything together. A man who told the world he wanted privacy and a quiet family life flew to an active war zone this week, left his young children at home, addressed international security leaders, invoked his late mother, challenged the foreign policy of the country, where he lives, and did all of it 3 days before his father's most important diplomatic trip in years, a charity running at a $2.5 million deficit, ignoring financial transparency requests for 2 full years, spending nearly 40 cents of every donated dollar on its own PR. California registration lapsed. Staff gutted. The entire structure quietly dissolved and rebranded as if changing the name changes the numbers. A visa situation that was never fully resolved, only temporarily quieted with a well-resourced legal organization, still working to unseal the underlying paperwork.
They're flipping him the royal bird by doing so. They're literally looking at him saying, well, that was our agreement with the Queen. We can manipulate you, and we're going to go do whatever we want. And they basically said as much in Australia. This is how it's going to be. You can't stop us, except for the one thing Charles could do and might do at this point, which is you got to take away their titles again.
And a king now boarding a plane to Washington to repair, with grace and dignity, a relationship his son publicly complicated 72 hours earlier.
Harry throwing a grenade right into the middle of it. And it's like, Putin's going to laugh at him, but actually the person who's most likely to be annoyed by this is the king, and I'd argue Donald Trump too. He doesn't care. He wants to cause trouble. And this is why the king needs to do more, Paula.
I agree. Although I will say the good news is Donald Trump clearly can't stand Harry or Meghan.
The one move King Charles still holds in reserve is the removal of Harry's titles. Not a punishment, a clarification. You want to be a private citizen? Then be one. Completely.
Donald Trump is likely to say something where King Charles will have to either laugh it off or just brush it under the rug and walk away. But I agree with you. It is time for the titles to be taken away, because if Harry was not Prince Harry and he was just Harry Mountbatten Windsor, would anybody care if he showed up anywhere? No. they would not.
No Duke, no His Royal Highness, no word prince on a stage in Kyiv. Without those titles, the speech at the Security Forum is just a man with opinions.
Ukraine just got a wonderful visit from King Carl Gustaf of Sweden, who can actually help them, because Sweden very much is one of the few European countries that is very, very much engaged in this Russian conflict. They have a longstanding historic kind of tension with Russia. It's why they basically have always a standing army. They have recruitment strategies. Basically, they actually have conscription services, which most countries in the region do not. I mean, when it comes to readiness for combat, like the three countries that are best prepared are Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, because they're the ones who are constantly adjusting and reacting to things, whereas the rest of Europe is like kind of wishy-washy on some of this. And so because of that, those countries, I think, are very well equipped and have a historic conflict with Russia similar to that of Ukraine.
The charity loses its most powerful fundraising credential. The visa story gets considerably more complicated without the royal protection around his name. The titles are the last real leverage the palace holds, and every week Charles delays using them is another week Harry uses them first, at moments and in places, and for purposes that serve nobody except Harry himself.
The not so young and very, very restless, because Harry, he don't want to be there. He wants to get out. But look, you've got other big news, Paula, about King Charles finally taking a bit of hard action against this couple.
Here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If everything about this week, the Ukraine speech, the timing, the charity finances, the visa, if all of it had been done by someone without a royal title, without the Diana connection, without the palace upbringing, would anyone be watching? Would anyone be listening? Would a single world leader have taken his call? The titles are the whole game. They always have been. Hit subscribe right now and turn on your notifications, because what King Charles does next is the story that ends this chapter entirely, and you do not want to miss it when it breaks. And the video on your screen right now goes even deeper into what the palace is reportedly planning. Watch that next.